Hello, I am Daisy, your hostess. If you found me at this video, welcome, and to my family, friends, and subscribers, well, soon to be friend, welcome back. We've been reading from the works of Norman Vincent Peale, particularly his book titled The Power of Positive Thinking, where he's shared many incidents of people who have overcome many life challenges by realizing that the way they think does influence how they show up for life and not only affect them directly, but also how it spills over in their life. We're now in video 5 of a 6-part reading series, and as I mentioned in the first video of this series, Norman Vincent Peale was an American religious leader and author who served as the pastor of Marble Collegiate Church in New York City for over 50 years. So it is no wonder that this body of work is put through the filter of his religious background. Having said that, for those that shun religious dogma, I would suggest not to miss out on some very good wisdom and golden nuggets on account of that. Because if you set aside the religious overtones, you will find common sense wisdom and logic to explain it in a very simple way. Now, giving the author credit, his references, which he uses, are the foundation and show that for centuries these pearls of wisdom have been passed down through the stories and books found by various authors of the Bible. So as we head into this next chapter, How to Use Faith in Healing, he begins his first sentence talking about religious faith. And mind you, I'm no theologian, yet I believe that if we can open to the broader aspect of the message, it is important for me to reconcile the difference between religion and faith as we head into this reading. Each of these are distinct but deeply connected concepts. Whereas faith is that internal personal trust and conviction in a higher power or spiritual truth, religion is the organized external structure which includes doctrines, communal rituals, and prayer directed towards a specific deity, as well as institutions created to practice and express that belief among others of like mind. I say this because I believe in faith healing, and I have personally experienced it in my life. We all are on a journey, and we're all fighting our own battles. And for those that are grounded in a religious doctrine based on the teachings of the Bible, you may find affinity with Norman Vincent Peale's delivery of his best-selling book, which we are sharing here in the channel right now. And for others who have eyes to see and ears to hear, you will do just fine, as only that which you need from this book will be what resonates with you the most. That's what I truly believe. So I want to thank you in advance for giving me a few minutes in my intro to share my thoughts on how to approach many of the books I read, which, and particularly this one, with an open mind, like an adventurer arriving at new lands never explored, with that childlike curiosity and wonder. And with that, I now turn the page. Chapter 11. How to Use Faith in Healing. Is religious faith a factor in healing? Important evidence indicates that it is. There was a time in my own experience when I was not convinced of this, but now I am, and that very definitely. I have seen too many evidences to believe otherwise. We are learning that faith properly understood and applied is a powerful factor in overcoming disease and establishing health. My conviction regarding this important question is shared by many medical men. Newspapers carried an account of the visit to this country of the famous Viennese surgeon Dr. Hans Finsterer. I quote the newspaper story, which was headed, "Honor Surgeon Guided by God." A Viennese doctor, Dr. Hans Finsterer, who believes the unseen hand of God's help make an operation successful, was selected by the International College of Surgeons for its highest honor, Master of Surgery. He was cited for his work in abdominal surgery with the use of local anesthesia only. Finsterer, 72-year-old professor at the University of Vienna, has performed more than 20,000 major operations, among them 8,000 gastric resections, removal of part or all of the stomach, using only local anesthesia. Finsterer said that although considerable progress has been made in medicine and surgery in the past few years, all advances are not sufficient in themselves to ensure a happy outcome in every operation. In many instances, he said, in what appeared to be simple surgical procedures, the patients died. And in some cases where the surgeon despaired of a patient, there was recovery. Some of our colleagues attribute these things to unpredictable chance, while others are convinced that in those difficult cases, their work has been aided by the unseen hand of God. Of late years, unfortunately, many patients and doctors have lost their conviction that all things depend on the providence of God. When we are once again convinced of the importance of God's help in our activities, and especially in the treatment of our patients, then true progress will have been accomplished in restoring the sick to health. So concludes the account of a great surgeon who combined his science with faith. I spoke at the National Convention of an important industry. It was a large gathering of the leaders in an amazingly creative merchandising enterprise that has established this particular industry as a vital factor in American business life. I was somewhat surprised when one of the leaders of this organization at the convention luncheon, where the discussion centered around taxation, rising costs, and business problems, turned to me and asked, "Do you believe that faith can heal?" There are a good many well-authenticated examples on record of people who have been healed by faith, I answered. Of course, I do not think we should depend on faith alone to heal a physical ailment. I believe in the combination of God and the doctor. This viewpoint takes advantage of medical science and the science of faith, and both are elements in the healing process. Let me tell you my story, the man continued. A number of years ago, I had a malady that was diagnosed as osteoma of the jaw, that is, a bone tumor on my jaw. The doctors told me it was practically incurable. You can imagine how that disturbed me. Desperately, I sought for help. Although I had attended church with fair regularity, still, I was not a particularly religious man. I scarcely ever read the Bible. One day, however, as I lay in my bed, it occurred to me that I would like to read the Bible, and I asked my wife to bring one to me. She was very surprised, for I have never before made such a request. I began to read and found consolation and comfort. I also became a bit more hopeful and less discouraged. I continued to read for extended periods every day, but that wasn't the chief result. I began to notice that the condition which had troubled me was growing less noticeable. At first I thought I imagined this, then I became convinced that some change was taking place in me. One day while reading the Bible, I had a curious inward feeling of warmth and great happiness. It is difficult to describe, and long ago I got over trying to explain the feeling. From that time on, my improvement was more rapid. I went back to the doctors who had first diagnosed my case. They examined me carefully. They were obviously surprised and agreed that my condition had improved, but warned me that this was only a temporary respite. Later, however, upon further examination, it was determined that the symptoms of osteoma had disappeared entirely. Still, the doctors told me it would probably start all over again. This did not disturb me, for in my heart I knew that I was healed. "How long has it been since your healing?" I asked. 14 years, was the answer. I studied this man. Strong, sturdy, healthy. He is one of the outstanding men in his industry. The incident was told to me in the factual way that a businessman would recount it. There was not the slightest indication of doubt in this man's mind. Indeed, how could there be? For whereas he had been condemned to death, here he was alive and vigorous. What did it? The skillful work of the physician plus. And what was the plus? Obviously, the faith that heals. The healing described by this gentleman is but one of many similar accounts, and so many of them are attested by competent medical evidence that it seems we must encourage people to make greater use of the amazing power of faith in healing. Sadly, the healing element in faith has suffered neglect. I am certain that faith can and does work what we call miracles, but which are in truth the operation of spiritually scientific laws. There is a growing emphasis in present-day religious practice which is designed to help people find healing from the sickness of mind, heart, soul, and body. This is a return to the original practice of Christianity. Only in recent times have we tended to overlook the fact that for centuries religion carried on healing activities. The very word pastor derives from a word meaning the cure of souls. In modern times, however, man made the false assumption that it is impossible to harmonize the teachings of the Bible with what is called science, and so the healing emphasis of religion was abandoned almost entirely to materialistic science. Today, however, the close association of religion and health is increasingly recognized. It is significant that the word holiness derives from a word meaning wholeness, and the word meditation, usually used in a religious sense, closely resembles the root meaning of the word medication. The affinity of the two words is startlingly evident when we realize that sincere and practical meditation upon God and His truth acts as a medication for the soul and body. Present-day medicine emphasizes psychosomatic factors in healing, thus recognizing the relationship of mental states to bodily health. Modern medical practice realizes and takes into consideration the close connection between how a man thinks and how he feels. Since religion deals with thought and feeling and basic attitudes, it is only natural that the science of faith should be important in the healing process. Harold Sherman, author and playwright, was asked to revise an important radio presentation with the promise that he would be contracted as the permanent writer. After some months of work, he was dismissed and his material used without credit. This resulted in financial difficulty and humiliation. The injustice rankling in his mind developed into a growing bitterness against the radio executive who had broken faith with him. Mr. Sherman declares that this is the one time in his life when he had murder in his heart. His hatred made him subject to a physical affliction in the form of a mycosis, a fungus growth which attacked the membranes of his throat. The best medical attention was secured, but something in addition was required. When he gave up his hate and developed a feeling of forgiveness and understanding, the condition gradually corrected itself. With the aid of medical science and a new mental attitude, he was healed of his affliction. A sensible and effective pattern for health and happiness is to utilize the skills and methods of medical science to the fullest possible extent and at the same time apply the wisdom, the experience, and the techniques of spiritual science. There is impressive evidence to support the belief that God works through both the practitioner of science, the doctor, and the practitioner of faith, the minister. Many physicians join in this point of view. At a Rotary Club luncheon, I sat at a table with 9 other men, one of them a physician who had recently been discharged from military service and had resumed his civilian practice. He said, "Upon my return from the Army, I noticed a change in my patients' troubles. I found that a high percentage do not need medicine but better thought patterns. They're not sick in their bodies so much as they are sick in their thoughts and emotions. They are all mixed up with fear thoughts, inferiority feelings, guilt, and resentment. I found that in treating them, I needed to be about as much a psychiatrist as a physician, and then I discovered that not even those therapies helped me fully to do my job. I became aware that in many cases, the basic trouble with people was spiritual. So I found myself frequently quoting the Bible to them. Then I fell into the habit of prescribing religious and inspirational books, especially those that give guidance in how to live." Directing his statement to me, he said, "It's about time you ministers began to realize that in the healing of many people, you too have a function to perform. Of course, you're not going to overlap on the work of the physician any more than we shall intrude on your function, but we doctors need the cooperation of ministers in helping people find health and well-being." I received a letter from a physician in an upstate New York town who said 60% of the people in this town are sick because they are maladjusted in their minds and in their souls. It is hard to realize that the modern soul is sick to such an extent that the physical organs pain. I suppose in time, continues the doctor, that ministers, priests, and rabbis will understand this relationship. This physician was kind enough to say that he prescribes my book, A Guide to Confident Living, and other similar books to his patients, and that noteworthy results have been achieved thereby. The manager of a Birmingham, Alabama bookstore sent me a prescription form made out by a physician of that city to be filled not at a drugstore, but at her bookstore. He prescribes specific books for specific troubles. Dr. Carl R. Ferris, formerly president of the Jackson County Medical Society of Kansas City, Missouri, with whom I had the pleasure of appearing on a joint health and happiness radio program, declared that in treating human ills, the physical and spiritual are often so deeply interrelated that there is often no clearly defined dividing line between the two. Years ago, my friend Dr. Clarence W. Lieb pointed out to me the effect on health of spiritual and psychiatric problems, and through his wise guidance, I began to see that fear and guilt, hate and resentment, problems with which I was dealing, were often closely connected with problems of health and physical well-being. So profoundly does Dr. Lee believe in this therapy that he, with Dr. Smiley Blanton, inaugurated the Religio-Psychiatric Clinic, which for years has ministered to hundreds at the Marble Collegiate Church in New York. The late Dr. William Seaman Brainbridge and I worked closely together in the relationship of religion and surgery, and we were able to bring health and new life to many. Two of my medical friends in New York, Dr. Z. Taylor Berkovitz and Dr. Howard Westcott, have been of inestimable help in my pastoral work through their wisely scientific and yet deeply spiritual understanding of the ills of the body, mind, and soul as related to faith. We have discovered the psychosomatic cause of high blood pressure as some form of subtle, repressed fear, a fear of things that might happen, not of things that are, says Dr. Rebecca Beard. They are largely fears of things in the future. In that sense, therefore, they are imaginary, for they may never happen at all. In the case of diabetes, it is grief or disappointment which we found uses up more energy than any other emotion, thereby exhausting the insulin which is manufactured by the pancreas cells until they are worn out. Here we find the emotions involved in the past, reliving the past and not being able to go forward into life. The medical world can give relief in disorders like these. They can give something that can lower the blood pressure when it is high or raise it when it is low, but not permanently. They can give insulin which will burn up more sugar into energy and give the diabetic relief. These are definite aids, but they do not offer complete cure. No drug or vaccine has been discovered to protect us from our own emotional conflicts. A better understanding of our own emotional selves and a return to religious faith seem to form the combination that holds the greatest promise of permanent help to any of us. The answer, Dr. Beard concludes, is in the healing teachings of Jesus. Another efficient woman physician wrote me of her development in combining the therapy of medicine and faith. I became interested in your straightforward religious philosophy. I had been working at top speed and getting tense, irritable, and at times beset with old fears and guilt, in fact, in need of release from morbid tension. At a low moment early one morning, I picked up your book and began to read it. This was the prescription that I needed. Here was God, the great physician, with faith in him as an antibiotic to kill the germs of fear and render useless the virus of guilt. I began to practice the good Christian principles outlined in your book. Gradually, there came a release of tension, and I felt relaxed and happier and slept well. I quit taking vitamin and pep pills. Then, she adds, and this is what I want to emphasize, I began to feel that I wanted to share this new experience with my patients, those who came to me with neurosis. I was surprised to find how many had read your book and others. The patient and I seem to have a common ground to work on. It has been an enriching experience. To talk about a faith in God has become a natural and easy thing to do. As a doctor, she adds, I have seen a number of miraculous recoveries due to divine aid being given. In the past few weeks, I have had an additional experience. My sister had to undergo a serious operation about 3 weeks ago. Following the operation, she developed an intestinal obstruction. On her 5th day, she was very critically ill, and as I left the hospital at noon, I realized that she must take a turn for the better very soon, or her hope of recovery would be slim. I was very worried, so I drove slowly around for about 20 minutes praying for a relief of this obstruction. Everything that could be done medically was being taken care of. I had not been home more than 10 minutes when the phone rang and her nurse told me that the obstruction had relieved itself and that she had taken a definite turn for the better. And since that time, she has recovered completely. Could I feel otherwise than that God's intervention had saved her life? So runs the letter of a successful practicing physician. In the light of this viewpoint based on a strictly common sense scientific attitude, we may approach the phenomenon of healing through faith with credibility. If I did not believe sincerely that the faith factor in healing is sound, I would certainly not develop the point of view contained in this chapter. Over a period of time, I have received from many readers and radio listeners, as well as from my own parishioners, accounts of healing in which the element of faith has been present. I have meticulously investigated many of these to satisfy my own mind as to their truthfulness. Also, I wanted to be able to declare to the most cynical that here is a way of health, happiness, and successful living which is so buttressed by evidence that only the person who wants to remain ill because of some subconscious will to fail attitude will ignore his possibilities for health implied in these experiences. The formula which these many incidents together present is briefly stated. The employment of all the resources of medical and psychological science combined with the resources of spiritual science. This is a combination of therapies that can surely bring health and well-being if it is the plan of God for the patient to live. Obviously, for each of us, there comes a time for this mortal life to end. Life itself never ends, only the earthly phase of it. We in these so-called old line churches have, in my humble judgment, missed one of our greatest possible contributions by failing to point out with positiveness that there is a sound message of health in Christianity. Failing to find this emphasis in the church, groups, organizations, and other spiritual bodies have been created to supply this deficiency in Christian teaching. But there is no longer any valid reason why all the churches should not recognize that which is authenticated, namely that there is healing in faith, and more generally offer sound healing techniques to our people. Fortunately, everywhere today, throughout our religious organizations, thoughtful, scientifically minded spiritual leaders are taking that extra step of faith based on the facts and the scriptures and are making available to the people as never before the formulas of the marvelous healing grace of Jesus Christ. In all of the investigations I have made into successful cases of healing, there seem to be certain factors present. First, a complete willingness to surrender oneself into the hands of God. Second, a complete letting go of all error, such as sin in any form, and a desire to be cleansed in the soul. Third, belief and faith in the combined therapy of medical science in harmony with the healing power of God. Fourth, a sincere willingness to accept God's answer, whatever it may be, and no irritation or bitterness against His will. Fifth, a substantial, unquestioning faith that God can heal. In all these healings, there seems to be an emphasis upon warmth and light and a feeling of assurance that power has passed through. In practically every case that I have examined, In one form or another, the patient talks about a moment when there was warmth, heat, beauty, peace, joy, and a sense of release. Sometimes it has been a sudden experience, other times a more gradual unfolding of the conviction that the healing has occurred. Always in my investigation of these matters, I have waited for elapsed time to prove that the healing is permanent and that those cases which I report are not based on any temporary improvement which might conceivably be the result of a momentary resurgence of strength. For example, may I relate a healing experience written for me by a woman whose reliability and judgment I profoundly respect. Documentation in this case is thoroughgoing and scientifically impressive. This woman was told that an immediate operation was necessary to remove a growth which had been diagnosed as malignant. I quote her exact words. All the precautionary treatments were taken, but the manifestations returned. As may be expected, I was terrified. I knew further hospital treatments were futile. There was no hope, so I turned to God for help. A very consecrated and spiritual child of God helped me by prayer to realize that the right knowledge of God and His healing Christ would help me too. I was most receptive to this kind of thinking and placed myself in God's hands. I had asked for this help one morning, as usual, and spent the day going about my household duties, which were many at the time. I was preparing the evening meal, all alone in the kitchen. I was aware of an unusually bright light in the room, and I felt a pressure against my whole left side, as though a person were standing very close beside me. I had heard of healings. I knew prayers were being offered in my behalf, so I decided this must be the healing Christ who was with me. I decided to wait until morning to be sure. If the symptoms of the trouble were gone, then I would know. By morning, the improvement was so noticeable, and I was so free in my mind, that I was certain and reported to my friend that the healing had taken place. The memory of that healing and the presence of Christ are as fresh in my mind today as then. That was 15 years ago, and my health steadily improved until I am in excellent condition now. In many heart cases, the therapy of faith, a quiet, serene faith in Jesus Christ, undoubtedly stimulates healing. People who experience a heart attack, who thereupon thoroughly and completely practice faith in Christ's healing grace, observing at the same time the rules prescribed by their physicians, report remarkable recovery histories. Perhaps such a person may even gain a greater degree of health than previously for having learned his limitations and realizing the excess strains he was placing upon himself now conserves his strength. But more than that, he has learned one of the greatest techniques of human well-being, that of surrendering himself to the recuperative power of God. This is done by consciously attaching himself to the creative process through mentally conceiving of recreative forces as operating within himself. The patient opens his consciousness to the tides of vitality and recreative energy inherent in the universe, which have been barred from his life through tension, high pressure, and other departures from the laws of well-being. An outstanding man suffered a heart attack about 35 years ago. He was told that he would never be able to work again. The orders were that he must spend much of his time in bed. He would likely be an invalid the remainder of his days, which days would be relatively few in number, so he was informed. It is doubtful whether such statements would be made to him in present-day medical practice. At any rate, he listened to these dire prophecies about his future and considered them carefully. One morning he awakened early and picked up his Bible, and by chance, or was it chance, opened it to the account of one of the healings of Jesus. He also read the statement, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever, from the book of Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. It occurred to him that if Jesus could and did heal people long ago, and that if he is the same as he was then, why couldn't he heal today? Why cannot Jesus heal me? He asked. Then faith welled up within him. Therefore, with simple confidence, he asked the Lord to heal him. He seemed to hear Jesus say, "Believest thou that I can do this?" And the answer was, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you can." He closed his eyes and seemed to feel the touch of the healing Christ upon his heart. All that day, he had a strange sense of rest. As the days passed, he became convinced that there was a rising tide of strength within him. Finally, one day he prayed, "Lord, if it is your will, tomorrow morning I'm going to get dressed, go outside, and within a few days I'm going back to work. I put myself completely in your care. If I should die tomorrow as a result of the increased activity, I want to thank you for all the wonderful days I have had. With you to help me, I shall start out tomorrow, and you will be with me all day long. I believe I will have sufficient strength, but if I should die as a result of this effort, I will be with you in eternity, and all will be well in either case." In this calm faith, he increased his activities as the days passed. He followed this formula every day for the entire period of his active career, which numbered 30 years from the date of his heart attack. He retired at 75. Few men I have known have been more vigorous in their undertakings or have been made a greater contribution to human welfare. Always, however, he conserved his physical and nervous strength. It was invariably his habit to lie down and rest after lunch, and he never allowed himself to get under stress. He was early to bed and early up, always employing rigorous and disciplinary rules of living. In all his activities, there was an absence of worry, resentment, and tension. He worked hard, but easily. The doctors were right. Had he continued according to the debilitating habits of his earlier life, he would probably have long since been dead or at least an invalid. The advice of the physician brought him to the point where the healing work of Christ could be accomplished. Without the heart attack, he would not have been mentally or spiritually ready for healing. Another friend of mine, a prominent businessman, suffered a heart attack. For weeks he was confined to his bed, but presently returned to his important responsibilities, where he now accomplishes all that he ever did previously, but with much less tension. He seems to possess a new power that he did not enjoy before. His recovery proceeded from a definite and scientific spiritual approach to his health problem. He had competent physicians and followed their directions explicitly, which is an important factor in such situations. In addition to the program of medication and treatment, however, he worked out a spiritual healing formula. He outlined it as follows, writing from the hospital. An intimate friend of mine, only 25 years old, was brought into the hospital with an attack similar to mine and died within 4 hours. 2 acquaintances of mine have suffered a similar fate in rooms nearby. It must be that I have work yet to do, so I shall return and apply myself to the tasks before me with the expectation of living longer and more abundantly than I have done without this experience. The doctors were wonderful, the nurses grand, the hospital ideal. He then proceeds to outline the technique of spiritual convalescence which he employed. The formula consists of 3 parts. 1. During the first stages, when absolute rest was demanded, I heeded the admonition of the psalmist, "Be still and know that I am God," from the book of Psalms 46, verse 10. That is to say, he completely relaxed and rested in the hands of God. 2. As the days grew brighter, I used the affirmation, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart," from the book of Psalms 27, verse 14. The patient put his heart under the care of God, and God placed his hand of healing upon his heart and renewed it. 3. Finally, with the return of strength came a new assurance and confidence to which I gave expression in the affirmation, I can do all things through Christ which strengthen me, from the book of Philippians chapter 4 verse 13. In this, he affirmed positively that strength was being conferred upon him, and in so doing, he received new power. In this 3-point formula, this man found healing. The able ministrations of his physicians conserved and stimulated the healing forces of his physical being. The equally wise application of faith completed his recovery by stimulating the spiritual powers within his nature. The two therapies together draw upon the two great renewal forces within our life, one the recuperative power of the human body, and the other the restorative forces resident within the mind. One responds to medical treatment, the other to faith treatment, and God presides in both areas. He made both body and mind, and he established the process of health and well-being governing both. In him we live and move and have our being, from the books of Acts, chapter 17, verse 28. In the prevention of sickness and in healing mind and body, do not fail to draw upon one of the greatest resources available to you, the faith that heals. In the light of the principles outlined in this chapter, what can you do of a constructive nature when a loved one or you are ill? Following are 8 practical suggestions. 1. Follow the advice of a prominent medical school head who said, "In sickness, send for your minister even as you send for your doctor." In other words, believe that spiritual forces as well as medical technique are important in healing. 2. Pray for the doctor. Realize that God uses trained human instrumentality to aid his healing powers. As one doctor has put it, we treat the patient and God heals him. Pray, therefore, that the doctor may be an open channel of God's healing grace. 3. Whatever you do, do not become panicky or filled with fear, for if you do, you will send out negative thoughts and therefore destructive thoughts in the direction of your loved one when he requires positive and healing thoughts to assist him. 4. Remember that God does nothing except by law. Also remember that our little materialistic laws are only fragmentary revelations of the great power flowing through the universe. Spiritual law also governs illness. God has arranged 2 remedies for all illnesses. One is healing through natural laws applicable by science, and the other brings healing by spiritual law applicable through faith. 5. Completely surrender your loved one into the hands of God. By your faith, you can place him in the flow of divine power. There is healing there, but in order for it to be effective, the patient must be completely released to the operation of God's will. This is difficult to understand and equally difficult to perform, but it is a fact that if the great desire for the loved one to live is matched with an equally great willingness to relinquish him to God, healing powers are amazingly set in motion. 6. It is also important that harmony prevail in the family, that is, a spiritual harmony. Remember the emphasis in the scripture from the book of Matthew chapter 18 verse 19. If 2 of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. Apparently, disharmony and disease are akin. 7. Form a picture in your mind of the loved one as being well. Visualize him in perfect health. Picture him as radiant with the love and goodness of God. The conscious mind may suggest sickness, even death, but 9/10 of your mind is in the subconscious. Let the picture of health sink into the subconscious, and this powerful part of your mind will send forth radiant health energy. What we believe in the subconscious, we usually get. Unless your faith controls the subconscious, you will never get any good thing. For the subconscious gives back only that which your real thought is. If the real thought is negative, the results will also be negative. If the real thought is positive, you will get positive and healing results. 8. Be perfectly natural. Ask God to heal your loved one. That is what you want with all your heart, so ask Him please to do it. But we suggest that you say please just once. Thereafter in your prayer, thank Him for His goodness. This affirmative faith will help to release deep spiritual power and also joy through reassurance of God's loving care. This joy will sustain you, and remember that joy itself possesses healing power. End of chapter. Chapter 12. When vitality sags, try this health formula. A woman, so I have heard, went into a drugstore and asked for a bottle of psychosomatic medicine. Such medicine, of course, is not found on drugstore shelves, for it does not come in pills or bottles. But there is a psychosomatic medicine just the same, and many of us need it. It is a prescription compound of prayer, faith, and dynamic spiritual thinking. It has been variously computed that from 50 to 75% of present-day people are ill because of the influence of improper mental states on their emotional and physical makeup. Therefore, such a medicine is of great importance. Many people who are below par will find that there is a health formula which, in addition to the services of their physicians, can be of great value to them. The manner in which spiritual and emotional treatment can restore declining vitality is illustrated by the sales manager referred to us by the head of a large company. This sales executive, formerly a man of outstanding efficiency and energetic driving power, experienced a serious decline both in ability and energy. He lost his creative skill. Previously, his sales ideas had been unique and outstanding. It soon became noticeable to his associates that this sales manager was slipping badly. He was urged to consult a doctor, and the company sent him to Atlantic City for a rest and later to Florida for a second attempt at recovery. Neither of these vacations seemed to be productive of any definite improvement. His physician, who knew about our religio-psychiatric clinic, recommended to the company president that the sales manager come to us for an interview. The president asked him to come, which he did, but he was rather indignant at being sent to a church. "This is a pretty pass," he fumed, "when they send a businessman to a preacher. I suppose you're going to pray with me and read the Bible," he said irritably. "I wouldn't be surprised," I answered, "for sometimes our troubles lie in an area where prayer and the therapy of the Bible can have an important effect." He proved most sullen and uncooperative, until finally I was forced to say to him, "I want to tell you bluntly that you had better cooperate with us or you're going to be fired." "Who told you that?" he demanded. "Your boss," I replied. "In fact, he says that unless we can straighten you out, as much as he regrets it, you're going to be through." You never saw such a stunned expression on anybody's face. "What do you think I ought to do?" he stammered. "Often," I replied, "a person gets into the state in which you find yourself because the mind is filled with fear, anxiety, tension, resentment, guilt, or a combination of all of them. When these emotional impediments accumulate to a certain weight, the personality cannot support them any longer and gives way. Normal sources of emotional, spiritual, and intellectual power become clogged up. So a person becomes bogged down by resentment, by fear, or by guilt. I do not know your trouble, but I would suggest that you think of me as a sympathetic friend with whom you can be absolutely confident, and that you tell me about yourself." I emphasized that it was important he conceal nothing, and that he completely empty himself of whatever fears, resentments, or guilt feelings might be in his mind. "I assure you that our interview will be held in strictest confidence. All of your company wants is to have you back, the same highly efficient person you were." In due course, the trouble came out. He had committed a series of sins, and these had involved him in a complicated maze of lies. He was living in fear of exposure, and all in all, it was a most pathetic mass of inner confusion. It came little short of mental filth. It was rather difficult to get him to talk, for he was essentially a decent person and had a strong sense of shame. I told him that I understood his reticence, but that this operation had to be performed and that it could not be accomplished without a thorough mind emptying. When it was all over, I shall never forget the manner in which he reacted. Standing on his feet, he began to stretch. He stood on tiptoes, reaching his fingers toward the ceiling, and then took a deep breath. "My," he said, "I feel good." It was a dramatic expression of release and relief. Then I suggested that he pray and ask God to forgive him and to fill him with peace and cleanness. "Do you mean for me to pray aloud?" he asked dubiously. "I never did that in my life." "Yes," I said, "it is a good practice and will strengthen you." It was a simple prayer, and as best as I can recall it, this is what he said. "Dear Lord, I have been an unclean man, and I am sorry for the wrong I have done. I have poured it all out to my friend here. I now ask you to forgive me and to fill me with peace. Also make me strong, so that I will never repeat these actions. Help me to be clean again and better, lots better." He went back to his office that very day. Nothing was ever said to him, and it did not need to be, for soon he got back into stride and is one of the best sales managers in his city today. Later I met his president, who said, "I don't know what you did to Bill, but he is certainly a ball of fire." "I did nothing. God did it," I replied. "Yes," he said, "I understand. Anyway, he is the old-time Bill." When this man's vitality sagged, he tried a health formula that restored him to normal efficiency. He took some psychosomatic medicine which cured him of an unhealthy spiritual and mental condition. Dr. Franklin Ebo of the University of Colorado Medical School maintains that 1/3 of all cases of illness in general hospitals are clearly organic in nature and onset. 1/3 are a combination of emotional and organic, and 1/3 are clearly emotional. Dr. Flanders Dunbar, author of Mind and Body, says, "It is not a question of whether an illness is physical or emotional, but how much of each." Every thoughtful person who has ever considered the matter realizes that the doctors are right when they tell us that resentment, hate, grudge, ill will, jealousy, vindictiveness are attitudes which produce ill health. Have a fit of anger and experience for yourself that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach, that sense of stomach sickness. Chemical reactions in the body are set up by emotional outbursts that result in feelings of ill health. Should these be continued either violently or in a simmering state over a period of time, the general condition of the body will deteriorate. In speaking of a certain man whom we both knew, a physician told me that the patient died of grigitis. The physician actually felt that the deceased passed away because of a long-held hatred. He did his body such damage that his resistance was lowered, the doctor explained, so that when a physical malady attacked him, he did not possess the stamina or renewing force to overcome it. He had undermined himself physically by the malignancy of his ill will. Dr. Charles Minor Cooper, San Francisco physician, in an article entitled Heart to Heart, Advice About Heart Trouble, says, "You must curb your emotional reactions. When I tell you that I have known a patient's blood pressure to jump 60 points almost instantaneously in response to an outburst of anger, you can understand what strain such reactions can throw upon the heart. One who is quick on the trigger," he wrote, "is likely to blame someone else impulsively for a fault or mistake when it would be wiser simply to avoid being so much disturbed by what is done and is therefore unavoidable." He quoted the great Scottish surgeon John Hunter. Dr. Hunter had a heart condition himself and a thorough understanding of the effect of strong emotion on his heart. He said that his life was at the mercy of anyone who could annoy him, and in fact, his death resulted from a heart attack caused by a fit of anger when he forgot to discipline himself. And Dr. Cooper concludes, "Whenever a business problem starts to vex you or you begin to get angry, let yourself go limp all over. This will dissipate your mounting inner turmoil. Your heart asks that it be permanently housed in a lean, cheerful, placid man who will intelligently curb his physical, mental, and emotional activities. So if you are under par, I suggest that you do a very scrupulous job of self-analysis." Honestly ask yourself if you're harboring any ill will or resentment or grudges, and if so, cast them out. Get rid of them without delay. They do not hurt anybody else. They do no harm to the person against whom you hold these feelings, but every day and every night of your life, they're eating at you. Many people suffer poor health, not because of what they eat, but from what is eating them. Emotional ills turn in upon yourself, sapping your energy, reducing your efficiency, causing deterioration in your health. And of course, they siphon off your happiness. So we realize today the effect of thought patterns upon physical states. We realize that a person can make himself ill by resentment. We know he can develop various kinds of physiological symptoms because of sense of guilt. Also, one may show definite physical symptoms as a result of fear and anxiety. We know that healing has been accomplished when the thoughts are changed. Recently, a diagnostician told me of a young woman who was admitted to the hospital with a temperature of 102 degrees. She had a definite case of rheumatoid arthritis. Her joints were badly swollen. In order to study the case thoroughly, the doctor gave her no medication except a slight sedative to relieve the pain. After 2 days, the young woman asked the doctor, "How long will I be in this condition? And how long must I remain in the hospital?" "I think I must tell you," replied the physician, "that you will probably be in the hospital for about 6 months. "You mean it will be 6 months before I can get married?" she demanded. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I cannot promise you anything better than that." This conversation took place in the evening. The next morning, the patient's temperature was normal and the swelling was gone from her joints. Unable to account for the change, the doctor observed her for a few days, then sent her home. In a month, she was back in the hospital in the same condition as before. Temperature 102, joints swollen. Counseling disclosed that her father insisted that she marry a certain man who would be an asset to him in his business connections. The girl loved her father, wanted to do as he wished, but did not want to marry a man whom she did not love. So her subconscious mind came to her assistance and it in effect gave her rheumatoid arthritis and a temperature. The doctor explained to the father that if he forced this marriage, his daughter could become an invalid. When told that she need not go through with the marriage, the girl's recovery was quick and permanent. Do not get the idea that if you have arthritis, you are married to the wrong person. This incident merely illustrates the profound effect of mental pain on physical conditions. I was interested to read a statement by a psychologist that infants can catch fear and hatred from people around them more quickly than they can catch measles or other infectious diseases. The virus of fear may burrow deeply into their subconscious and remain there for a lifetime. But, adds the psychologist, fortunately, infants can also catch love and goodness and faith and so grow up to become normal, healthy children and adults. In an article in the Ladies' Home Journal, Constance J. Foster quotes Dr. Edward Weiss of Temple University Medical School in a speech to the American College of Physicians, in which Dr. Weiss stated that chronic victims of pains and aches in the muscles and joints may be suffering from nursing and smoldering grudge against someone close to them. He added that such persons usually are totally unaware that they are bearing a chronic resentment. To clear up any possible misunderstanding, the author continues, it is necessary to state emphatically that emotions and feelings are quite as real as germs and no less respectable. The resultant pain and suffering of diseases caused primarily by the emotions are no more imaginary than those caused by bacteria. In no case is the patient consciously to blame for developing the disease. Such persons are not suffering from any disease of the mind, but rather from a disorder of their feelings, often linked to a marital or parent-child problem. In this same magazine article, the story is told of a certain Mrs. X who came to the doctor's office complaining of a breaking out on her hands, which was diagnosed as eczema. The doctor encouraged Mrs. X to talk about herself. It developed that she was a very rigid person. Her lips were thin and unyielding. She was also rheumatoid. The doctor sent Mrs. X to a psychiatrist who saw at once that there was some irritating situation in her life, which she was translating outwardly in the form of a skin rash. thus taking out on her own person the urge to scratch something or person. The doctor finally put it to her bluntly. "What is eating you?" he asked. "You're peeved at something, aren't you?" She stiffened up like a ramrod and marched right out of the office, so I knew I'd hit the target too closely for comfort. A few days later she came back. Due to the agony of the eczema, she was ready to let me help her, even if it meant she had to give up a hate. It turned out to be a family row over a will, with Mrs. X feeling that she had been treated unfairly by a younger brother. When she got rid of the hostility, she got well, and when she made up the quarrel with her brother, within 24 hours the eczema vanished. That there is even a relationship between emotional disturbance and the common cold is indicated by Dr. L.J. Saul of the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, who has made a study of this subject. Emotional disturbances are believed to affect the blood circulation in the linings of nose and throat. They also affect glandular secretions. These factors make the mucous membranes more susceptible to attack by cold viruses or germ infection. Dr. Edmund P. Fowler, Jr. of Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons, stated, "There are colds which develop in medical students at the time of their examinations and colds which develop in many persons before or after a trip. Colds develop in housewives when they must care for a large family, and one of these sees a cold develop in a patient when his mother-in-law comes to live in the house, and it often disappears when she leaves." Dr. Fowler does not specify the effects on the mother-in-law of a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law. Perhaps she has a cold also. One of the cases Dr. Fowler reports concerned a 25-year-old salesgirl. When she visited his office, her nose was stuffy, the lining was red and congested, and she suffered from a headache and a mild temperature. These symptoms had persisted for nearly 2 weeks. Questioning disclosed that they had started a few hours after a violent quarrel with her fiancé. Local treatments cleared up the cold, but the young woman was back in a few weeks with another attack. This time, the trouble had started after an argument with the butcher. Again, treatments brought relief, but the girl continued to have recurring colds, and each time they were traced to a fit of anger. Finally, Dr. Fowler was able to persuade the girl that her bad temper was at the root of her chronic cold symptoms. When she learned to lead a calmer existence, her sneezes and sniffles disappeared. And yet people still think when the Bible tells you not to hate or to get angry that it is theoretical advice. The Bible is not theoretical. It is our greatest book of wisdom. It is filled with practical advice on living and on health. Anger, resentment, and guilt make you sick. Modern physicians tell us, which proves once again that the most up-to-date book on personal well-being is the Holy Bible. Neglected by so many or regarded by them as purely a religious book, and certainly as one that is not practical. No wonder more copies are read than all other books. That is because in this book we discover not only what is wrong with us, but how to correct it as well. Dr. Fowler calls attention to the emotional colds suffered by children who feel insecure. He reports that many cases of chronic colds occur in children who come from broken homes. An older child often has recurring respiratory infection when a new baby is born because he feels neglected and jealous. A 9-year-old boy had an extremely dictatorial father and an indulgent mother. The conflict between the strictness of one parent and the lenience of the other obviously was disturbing to the child. He particularly feared punishment by his father. This boy suffered for several years from continuous coughs and sniffles. It was noted that the colds disappeared when he went to camp, away from his parents. Since irritation, anger, hate, and resentment have such a powerful effect in producing ill health, what is the antidote? Obviously, it is to fill the mind with attitudes of goodwill, forgiveness, faith, love, and the spirit of imperturbability. And how is that accomplished? Following are some practical suggestions. They have been used successfully by many in counteracting especially the emotion of anger. A consistent application of these suggestions can produce feelings of well-being. 1. Remember that anger is an emotion, and an emotion is always warm, even hot. Therefore, to reduce an emotion, cool it. And how do you cool it? When a person gets angry, the fists tend to clench, the voice rises in stridency, muscles tense, the body becomes rigid. Psychologically, you are poised for fight. Adrenaline shoots through the body. This is the old caveman hangover in the nervous system. So deliberately oppose the heat of this emotion with coolness, freeze it out. Deliberately, by an act of will, keep your hands from clenching. Hold your fingers out straight. Deliberately reduce your tone. Bring it down to a whisper. Remember that it is difficult to argue in a whisper. Slump in a chair, or even lie down if possible. It is very difficult to get mad lying down. 2. Say aloud to yourself, "Don't be a fool. This won't get me anywhere, so skip it." At that moment, it may be a bit hard to pray, but try it anyway. At least conjure up a picture of Jesus Christ in your mind and try to think of him mad, just as you are. You can't do it, and the effort will serve to puncture your angry emotions. 3. One of the best techniques for cooling off anger was suggested by Mrs. Grace Osler. She formerly employed the usual count to 10 technique, but happened to notice that the first 10 words of the Lord's Prayer work better. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. When angry, say 10 times, and your anger will lose its power over you. 4. Anger is a great term expressing the accumulated vehemence of a multitude of minor irritations. These irritations, each rather small in itself, having gathered force by reason of the one being added to the other, finally blaze forth in a fury that often leaves us abashed at ourselves. Therefore, make a list of everything that irritates you. No matter how inconsequential it may be or how silly each is, list it just the same. The purpose in doing this is to dry up the tiny rivulets that feed the great river of anger. 5. Make each separate irritation a special object of prayer. Get a victory over each, one at a time. Instead of attempting to destroy all of your anger, which, as we have pointed out, is a consolidated force, snip away by prayer each annoyance that feeds your anger. In this way, you will weaken your anger to the point where presently you will gain control over it. 6. Train yourself so that every time you feel the surge of anger, you say, "Is this really worth what it's doing to me emotionally? I will make a fool of myself. I will lose friends." In order to get the full effect of this technique, practice saying to yourself a few times every day, "It is never worth it to get worked up or mad about anything." Also affirm, "It isn't worth to spend $1,000 worth of emotion on a 5-cent irritation." 7. When a hurt feeling situation arises, get it straightened out as quickly as possible. Don't brood over it for a minute longer than you can help. Do something about it. Do not allow yourself to sulk or indulge in self-pity. Don't mope around with resentful thoughts. The minute your feelings are hurt, do just as when you hurt your finger. Immediately apply the cure. Unless you do so, the situation can become distorted, out of all proportion. So put some spiritual iodine on the hurt at once by saying a prayer of love and forgiveness. 8. Apply grievance drainage to your mind. That is, open your mind and let the grievance flow out. Go to someone you trust and pour it out to him until a vestige of it remains within you. Then forget it. 9. Simply start praying for the person who has hurt your feelings. Continue this until you feel the malice fading away. Sometimes you may have to pray for quite a while to get that result. A man who tried this method told me that he kept account of the number of times he needed to pray until the grievance left and peace came. It was exactly 64 times. He literally prayed it out of his system. This is positively guaranteed to work. 10. Say this little prayer. May the love of Christ fill my heart. Then add this line. May the love of Christ for blank, insert the other person's name, flood my soul. Pray this, mean it, or ask to mean it, and you will get relief. 11. Actually take the advice of Jesus to forgive 70 times 7. To be literal, that means 490 times. Before you have forgiven a person that many times, you will be free of resentment. 12. Finally, this wild, undisciplined, primitive urge in you, which flames to the surface, can be tamed only by allowing Jesus Christ to take control. Therefore, complete this lesson by saying to Jesus Christ, even as you can convert a person's morals, so now I ask you to convert my nerves. As you give power over the sins of the flesh, so give me power over the sins of the disposition. Bring my temper under your control. Give me thy healing peace in my nervous system as well as in my soul. If you are beset by temper, repeat the above prayer 3 times every day. It might be advisable to print it on a card and put it on your desk or above the kitchen sink or in your pocketbook. End of chapter. Chapter 13. Inflow of new thoughts can remake you. One of the most important and powerful facts about you is expressed in the following statement by William James, who was one of the wisest men America has produced. William James said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. As you think, so shall you be. So flush out old, tired, worn-out thoughts. Fill your mind with fresh, new creative thoughts of faith, love, and goodness. By this process, you can actually remake your life." And where do you find such personality remaking thoughts? I know a business executive, a modest man, but the type of individual who is never defeated. No problem, no setback, no opposition ever gets him down. He simply attacks each difficulty with an optimistic attitude and a sure confidence that it will work out right, and in some strange way, it always does for him. He seems to have a magic touch on life, a touch that never fails. Because of that impressive characteristic, this man always interested me. I knew there was a definite explanation of his being this way, and of course wanted to hear his story, but in view of his modesty and reticence, it was not easy to persuade him to talk about himself. One day, when he was in the mood, he told me his secret, an amazing, simple, but effective secret. I was visiting his plant, a modern, up-to-date structure, much of it air-conditioned. Latest type machinery and methods of production make it a factory of outstanding efficiency. Labor management relations seem as nearly perfect as is possible among imperfect human beings. A spirit of goodwill pervades the entire organization. His office is ultra-modernistically decorated and furnished with handsome desks, rugs, and paneled with exotic woods. The decorating scheme is 5 startling colors blended together pleasantly. All in all, it is the last word and then some. Imagine then my surprise to see on his highly polished white mahogany desk an old battered copy of the Bible. It was the only old object in those ultra-modern rooms. I commented upon this seemingly strange inconsistency. "That book," he replied, pointing to the Bible, "is the most up-to-date thing in this plant. Equipment wears out and furnishing styles change, but that book is so far ahead of us that it never gets out of date. When I went to college, my good Christian mother gave me that Bible with the suggestion that if I would read and practice its teachings, I would learn how to get through life successfully. But I thought she was just a nice old lady." He chuckled. At my age, she seemed old. She wasn't really old, and to humor her, I took the Bible, but for years practically never looked at it. I thought I didn't need it. "Well," he continued slangily, "I was a dope. I was stupid, and I got my life in a terrible mess. Everything went wrong primarily because I was wrong. I was thinking wrong, acting wrong, doing wrong. I succeeded at nothing, failed at everything. Now I realize that my principal trouble was wrong thinking. I was negative, resentful, cocky, opinionated. Nobody could tell me anything. I thought I knew everything. I was filled with gripes at everybody. Little wonder nobody liked me. I certainly was a washout." So ran his dismal story. "One night, in going through some papers," he continued, "I came across the long-forgotten Bible. It brought up old memories, and I started aimlessly to read it. Do you know, it is strange how things happen, how in just a flashing moment of time, everything becomes different. Well, as I read, A sentence leaped up at me. A sentence that changed my life. And when I say changed, I mean changed. From the minute I read that sentence, everything has been different, tremendously different. What is this wonderful sentence? I wanted to know, and he quoted it slowly. The Lord is the strength of my life. In this will I be confident, from the book Psalm 27, verse 1 and 3. I don't know why that one line affected me so, he went on, but it did. I know now that I was weak and a failure because I had no faith, no confidence. I was very negative, a defeatist. Something happened inside my mind. I guess I had what they call a spiritual experience. My thought pattern shifted from negative to positive. I decided to put my faith in God and sincerely do my best, trying to follow the principles outlined in the Bible. As I did so, I began to get hold of a new set of thoughts. I began to think differently. In time, my old failure thoughts were flushed out by this new spiritual experience, and an inflow of new thoughts gradually, but actually remade me. So concluded the story of this businessman. He altered his thinking, and the new thoughts which flowed in displaced the old thoughts which had been defeating him, and his life was changed. This incident illustrates an important fact about human nature. You can think your way to failure and unhappiness, but you can also think your way to success and happiness. The world in which you live is not primarily determined by outward conditions and circumstances, but by thoughts that habitually occupy your mind. Remember the wise words of Marcus Aurelius, one of the great thinkers of antiquity, who said, "A man's life is what his thought makes of it." It has been said that the wisest man who ever lived in America was Ralph Waldo Emerson, the sage of Concord. Emerson declared, "A man is what he thinks about all day long." A famous psychologist says there's a deep tendency in human nature to become precisely like that which you habitually imagine yourself to be. It has been said that thoughts are things, that they actually possess dynamic power. Judged by the power they exercise, one can readily accept such an appraisal. You can actually think yourself into or out of situations. You can make yourself ill with your thoughts, and by the same token, you can make yourself well by the use of a different and healing type of thought. Think one way, and you attract the conditions which that type of thinking indicates. Think another way, and you can create an entirely different set of conditions. Conditions are created by thoughts far more powerfully than conditions create thoughts. Think positively, for example, and you set in motion positive forces which bring positive results to pass. Positive thoughts create around yourself an atmosphere propitious to the development of positive outcomes. On the contrary, think negative thoughts and you create around yourself an atmosphere propitious to the development of negative results. To change your circumstances, first start thinking differently. Do not passively accept unsatisfactory circumstances, but form a picture in your mind of circumstances as they should be. Hold that picture, develop it firmly in all details, believe in it, pray about it, work at it, and you can actualize it according to that mental image emphasized in your positive thinking. This is one of the greatest laws in the universe. Fervently do I wish I had discovered it as a very young man. It dawned upon me much later in life, and I have found it to be one of the greatest, if not my greatest discovery, outside of my relationship to God. And in a deep sense, this law is a factor in one's relationship with God because it channels God's power into personality. This great law, briefly and simply stated, is that if you think in negative terms, you will get negative results. If you think in positive terms, you will achieve positive results. That is the simple fact which is at the basis of an astonishing law of prosperity and success. In 3 words, believe and succeed. I learned this law in a very interesting manner. Some years ago, a group of us consisting of Lowell Thomas, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, Branch Rickey, Raymond Thornburg, and others established an inspirational self-help magazine called Guideposts. This magazine has a double function. First, by relating stories of people who, through their faith, have overcome difficulties. It teaches techniques of victorious living, victory over fear, over circumstances, over obstacles, over resentment. It teaches faith over all manner of negativism. Second, as a non-profit, non-sectarian, interfaith publication, it teaches the great fact that God is in the stream of history and that this nation was founded on belief in God and His laws. The magazine reminds its readers that America is the first great nation in history to be established on a definitely religious premise, and that unless we keep it so, our freedoms will deteriorate. Mr. Raymond Thornburg, as publisher, and I, as editor in starting the magazine, had no financial backing to underwrite it. It was begun on faith. In fact, its first offices were in rooms above a grocery store in the little village of Pauling, New York. There was a borrowed typewriter, a few rickety chairs, and that was all except a great idea and great faith. Slowly, a subscription list of 25,000 developed. The future seemed promising. Suddenly, one night, fire broke out, and within an hour, the publishing house was destroyed, and with it, the total list of subscribers. Foolishly, no duplicate list had been made. Lowell Thomas, loyal and efficient patron of Guideposts from the very start, mentioned this sad circumstance on his radio broadcast, and as a result, we soon had 30,000 subscribers, practically all the old ones and many new ones. The subscription list rose approximately 40,000, but costs increased even more rapidly. The magazine, which has always been sold for less than cost in order widely to disseminate the message, was more expensive than anticipated, and we were faced with difficult financial problems. In fact, at one time, it seemed almost impossible to keep it going. At this juncture, we called a meeting, and I'm sure you never attended a more pessimistic, negative, discouraging meeting. It dripped with pessimism. Where were we going to get the money to pay our bills? We figured out ways of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Complete discouragement filled our minds. A woman had invited to this meeting whom we all regarded most highly. But one reason she was included in this meeting was because on a previous occasion she had contributed $2,000 to help inaugurate Guidepost magazine. It was hoped that lightning might strike twice in the same place, but this time she gave us something of more value than money. As this dismal meeting progressed, she remained silent for a long time, but finally said, "I suppose you gentlemen would like me to make another financial contribution. I might as well put you out of your misery. I'm not going to give you another cent." This did not put us out of our misery. On the contrary, it put us deeper into our misery. "But," she continued, "I will give you something far more valuable than money." This astonished us, for we could not possibly imagine anything of more value than money in the circumstances. "I am going to give you an idea," she continued, "a creative idea." Well, we thought to ourselves unenthusiastically, how can we pay our bills with an idea? Ah, but an idea is just what will help you pay bills. Every achievement in this world was first projected as a creative idea. First the idea, then faith in it, then the means of implementing the idea. That is the way success proceeds. "Now," she said, "here's the idea. What is your present trouble? It is that you lack everything. You lack money, you lack subscribers, you lack equipment, you lack ideas, you lack courage. Why do you lack all these requirements? Simply because you are thinking lack. If you think lack, you create the conditions that produce a state of lack. By this constant mental emphasis upon what you lack, you have frustrated the creative process that can give impetus to the development of Guidepost. You have been working hard from the standpoint of doing many things, but you have failed to do the one all-important thing that will lend power to all of your other efforts. You have not employed positive thinking. Instead, you have thought in terms of lack. To correct that situation, reverse the mental process and begin to think prosperity, achievement, success. This will require practice, but it can be done quickly if you will demonstrate faith. The process is to visualize, that is, to see guideposts in terms of successful achievement. Create a mental picture of Guidepost as a great magazine sweeping the country. Visualize large numbers of subscribers, all eagerly reading this inspirational material and profiting thereby. Create a mental image of lives being changed by the philosophy of achievement with Guidepost teaches monthly in its issues. Do not hold mental pictures of difficulties and failures, but lift your mind above them and visualize powers and achievements. When you elevate your thoughts into the area of visualized attainment, you look down on your problems rather than from below up at them, and thus you get a much more encouraging view of them. Always come up over your problems, never approach a problem below. Now let me continue further, she said. How many subscribers do you need at the moment to keep going? We thought quickly and said 100,000. We had 40,000. All right, she said confidently. That is not hard. That is easy. Visualize 100,000 people being creatively helped by this magazine, and you will have them. In fact, the minute you can see them in your mind, you will have them. She turned to me and said, Norman, can you see 100,000 subscribers at this minute? Look out there. Look ahead of you. In your mind's eye, can you see them? I wasn't convinced as yet, and I said rather doubtfully, well, maybe so, but they seem pretty dim to me. She was a little disappointed in me, I thought, as she asked, can't you imaginatively visualize 100,000 subscribers? I guess my imagination wasn't working very well because all I could see was the insufficient but actual 40,000. Then she turned to my old friend Raymond Thornburg, who has been blessed with a gloriously victorious personality, and she said, calling him by his nickname, Pinky, can you visualize 100,000 subscribers? I rather doubted that Pinky would see them. He is a rubber manufacturer who gives his time freely from his own business to help advance this inspirational not-profit magazine, and you would not ordinarily think that a rubber manufacturer would respond to this type of thinking. But he has the faculty of creative imagination. I noticed by the fascinated look on his face that she had him. He was gazing straight ahead with rather a look of wonder when she asked, do you see the 100,000 subscribers? Yes, he cried with eagerness. Yes, I do see them. Electrified, I demanded, where? Point them out to me. Then I too began to visualize them. Now, continued our friend, let us bow our heads and together thank God for giving us 100,000 subscribers. Frankly, I thought that was pushing the Lord rather hard, but it was justified by a verse in the scriptures where it says, and all things whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing you shall receive them, from the book of Matthew chapter 21 verse 22. That means when you pray for something, at the same time, visualize what you pray for. Believe that if it is God's will and is worthwhile, not selfishly sought after, but for human good, that it is at that moment given you. If you have difficulty in following this reasoning, let me tell you that from that moment until the present writing, Guidepost never lacked for anything. It has found wonderful friends and has had fine support. It has been able always to meet its bills, purchase needed equipment, finance itself, and as I write these words, Guidepost is nearing the 500,000 mark and more subscriptions are coming in regularly, sometimes as many as 3,000 or 4,000 per day. I recite this instance not for the purpose of advertising Guidepost, although I strongly recommend this magazine to all my readers, and if you would like to be a subscriber, write to Guidepost, Pauling, New York, for information. But I tell the story because I was awed by this experience, realizing that I had stumbled upon a law, a tremendous law of personal victory. I decided to apply it thereafter to my own problems, and wherever I have done so, can report a marvelous result. Wherever I have failed to do so, I have missed great results. It is as simple as this. Put your problem in God's hands. In your thoughts, rise above the problem so that you look down upon it, not up at it. Test it according to God's will. That is, do not try to get success from something that is wrong. Be sure it is right morally, spiritually, and ethically. You can never get a right result from an error. If your thinking is wrong, it is wrong and not right and can never be right. So as long as it is wrong in the essence, it is bound to be wrong in the result. Therefore, be sure it is right. Then hold it up in God's name and visualize a great result. Keep the idea of prosperity, of achievement, and of attainment firmly fixed in your mind. Never entertain a failure thought. Should a negative thought of defeat come into your mind, expel it by increasing the positive affirmation. Affirm aloud, God is now giving me success. He is now giving me attainment. The mental vision, which you create and firmly hold in consciousness, will be actualized if you continually affirm it in your thoughts, and if you work diligently and effectively. This creative process, simply stated, is visualize, prioritize, and finally actualize. People in all walks of life who accomplish notable achievements know the value of this law in their experience. Henry J. Kaiser told me that at one time he was building a levee along a river bank, and there came a great storm and flood which buried all his earth-moving machinery and destroyed the work that had been done. Upon going out to observe the damage after the water receded, he found his workers standing around glumly, looking at the mud and the buried machinery. He came among them and said with a smile, "Why are you so glum?" "Don't you see what has happened?" they asked. "Our machinery is covered with mud." "What mud?" he asked brightly. "What mud?" they repeated in astonishment. "Look around you. It is a sea of mud." "Oh," he laughed, "I don't see any mud." "But how can you say that?" they asked him. "Because," said Mr. Kaiser, "I am looking up at a clear blue sky, and there is no mud up there. There's only sunshine, and I never saw any mud that could stand against sunshine. Soon it will be dried up, and then you will be able to move your machinery and start all over again." How right he is. If your eyes are looking down in the mud, and you feel a sense of failure, you will create defeat for yourself. Optimistic visualization combined with prayer and faith will inevitably actualize achievement. Another friend of mine who started from the lowliest beginnings has performed some outstanding achievements. I remember him in his school days as an awkward, unprepossessing, very shy country boy. But he had character and one of the keenest brains I have ever encountered. Today, he is an outstanding man in his line. I asked him, "What is the secret of your success?" "The people who have worked with me across the years and the unlimited opportunity given any boy in the United States of America," he replied. "Yes, I know that is true, but I'm sure you must have some personal technique, and I would be interested in having it," I said. "It all lies in how you think about problems," he replied. "I attack a problem and shake it to pieces with my mind. I put all the mental power I have upon it. Second, I pray about it most sincerely. Third, I paint a mental picture of success. Fourth, I always ask myself, what is the right thing to do?" For, he said, "Nothing will be right if it is wrong. Nothing that is wrong will ever come out right. Fifth, I give it all I've got. But let me emphasize again," he concluded, "if you're thinking defeat, change your thoughts at once. Get new and positive thoughts. That is primary and basic in overcoming difficulties and in achieving." At this very minute, as you read this book, potential ideas are in your mind. By releasing and developing these ideas, you can solve your financial problem, your business situation. You can care for yourself and your family and attain success in your ventures. A steady inflow and practical use of these creative thoughts can remake your life and you along with it. There was a time when I acquiesced in the silly idea that there is no relationship between faith and prosperity, that when one talked about religion, he should never relate it to achievement, that it dealt only with ethics and morals or social values. But now I realize that such a viewpoint limits the power of God in the development of the individual. Religion teaches that there is a tremendous power in the universe and that this power can dwell in personality. It is a power that can blast out all defeat and lift a person above all difficult situations. We have seen the demonstration of atomic energy. We know that astonishing and enormous energy exists in the universe. This same force of energy is resident in the human mind. Nothing on earth is greater than the human mind in potential power. The average individual is capable of much greater achievement than he has ever realized. This is true regardless of who is reading this statement. When you actually learn to release yourself, you will discover that your mind contains ideas of such creative value that you need not lack anything. By the full and proper use of your power stimulated by God power, you can make your life successful. You can make just about anything of your life. Anything you will believe or will visualize. Anything you will pray for and work for. Look deeply into your mind. Amazing wonders are there. Whatever your situation may be, you can improve it. First, quiet your mind so that inspirations may rise from its depth. Believe that God is now helping you visualize achievement. Organize your life on a spiritual basis so that God's principles work within you. Hold firmly in your mind a picture not of failure but of success. Do these things and creative thoughts will flow freely from your mind. This is an amazing law, one that can change anybody's life, including your own. An inflow of new thoughts can remake you regardless of every difficulty you may now face. And I repeat, every difficulty. In the last analysis, the basic reason a person fails to live a creative and successful life is because of error within himself. He thinks wrong. He needs to correct the error in his thoughts. He needs to practice right thinking. When the 23rd Psalm says, "He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness," it not only means the paths of goodness, but the paths of right-mindedness as well. When Isaiah says, "Let the wicked forsake his way and the unrighteous man his thoughts," Isaiah, from chapter 55, verse 7, it not only means that a person is to depart from evil and do good, but that he is to change his thinking from wrong to right, from error to truth. The great secret of successful living is to reduce the amount of error in oneself and increase the amount of truth. An inflow of new, right, health-leading thoughts through the mind creatively affects the circumstances of life, for truth always produces right procedures and therefore right results. Years ago, I knew a young man who for a while was one of the most complete personality failures in my entire experience. He had a delightful personality, but he failed at everything. A person would employ him and be enthusiastic about him, but soon his enthusiasm would cool and it was not long until he was out of that position. This failure pattern was repeated many times. He was a failure as a person as well as an employee. He missed connections with everything. He just couldn't do anything right, and he used to ask me, "What is wrong with me that everything goes wrong?" Still, he had a lot of conceit. He was cocky and smug and had the irritating habit of blaming everybody but himself. Something was wrong with every office with which he was connected or every organization that employed him. He blamed everybody else for his failures, never himself. He would never look inside himself. It never occurred to him that anything could be wrong with him. One night, however, he wanted to talk with me, and as I had to make a drive of about 100 miles to deliver a speech, he drove there and back with me. On our return, we stopped along about midnight at a roadside stand for a hamburger and a cup of coffee. I don't know what was in that hamburger sandwich, but since this incident, I have had a new respect for hamburgers, for of a sudden he shouted, "I've got it, I've got it." "You've got what?" I asked in astonishment. "I've got the answer. Now I know what's the trouble with me. It's that everything goes wrong with me because I myself am wrong." I clapped my hand on his back and said, "Boy, at last you're on your way." "Why, it's as clear as a crystal," he said. "I have been thinking wrong, and as a result I have created wrong outcomes." By this time, we were out in the moonlight standing alongside my car, and I said to him, "Harry, you must go one step further and ask God to make you right inwardly." I quoted this passage from the Bible. "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." From the book of John, chapter 8, verse 32. Get the truth into your mind, and you will be free of your failures. He became an enthusiastic, practicing follower of Jesus Christ. Through real faith and a complete change of thoughts and personal habits, wrong thinking and wrong action were removed from his nature. He straightened out by developing a right or righteous pattern instead of an error pattern. When he was made right, then everything began to go right for him. Following are 7 practical steps for changing your mental attitudes from negative to positive, for releasing creative new thoughts, and for shifting from error patterns to truth patterns. Try them. Keep on trying them. They will work. 1. For the next 24 hours, deliberately speak hopefully about everything, about your job, about your health, about your future. Go out of your way to talk optimistically about everything. This will be difficult, for possibly it is your habit to talk pessimistically. From this negative habit, you must remain yourself, even if it requires an act of will. 2. After speaking, hopefully for 24 hours, continue the practice for 1 week. Then you can be permitted to be realistic for a day or two. You will discover that what you meant by realistic a week ago was actually pessimistic, but what you now mean by realistic is something entirely different. It is the dawning of the positive outlook. When most people say they're being realistic, they delude themselves. They're simply being negative. 3. You must feed your mind as you feed your body. And to make your mind healthy, you must feed it nourishing, wholesome thoughts. Therefore, today, start to shift your mind from negative to positive thinking. Start at the very beginning of the New Testament and underscore every sentence about faith. Continue doing this until you have marked every passage in the 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Particularly note Mark 11, verses 22, 23, 24. They will serve as samples of the verses you are to underscore and fix deeply in your consciousness. 4. Then commit the underscored passages to memory. Commit each one each day until you can recite the entire list from memory. This will take time, but remember, you have consumed much more time becoming a negative thinker than this will require. Effort and time will be needed to unlearn your negative pattern. 5. Make a list of your friends to determine who is the most positive thinker among them and deliberately cultivate a society. Do not abandon your negative friends, but get closer to those with a positive point of view for a while until you have absorbed their spirit. Then go back among your negative friends and give them your newly acquired thought pattern without taking on their negativism. 6. Avoid argument. But whenever a negative attitude is expressed, counter with a positive and optimistic opinion. 7. Pray a great deal and always let your prayer take the form of thanksgiving on the assumption that God is giving you great and wonderful things. For if you think He is, He surely is. God will not give you any greater blessing than you can believe in. He wants to give you great things, but even He cannot make you take anything greater than you are equipped by faith to receive, according to your faith, that is in proportion to be it unto you. From the book of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 29. The secret of a better and more successful life is to cast out those old, dead, unhealthy thoughts. Substitute for them new, vital, dynamic faith thoughts. You can depend upon it. An inflow of new thought will remake you and your life. End of chapter. Meet me at the next video where we continue with the reading of The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. Please do hit the like button, share this with your family, with your friends, with like-minded people, and yes, subscribe to the channel.